Today's conversation is unusual for this podcast, but it's an important one. Over half of marriages end in divorce, and about 30% of those become high conflict, deeply impacting our children. This week, I'm joined by Lisa Johnson, a high conflict divorce coach, to unpack the often misunderstood topic of coercive control. We'll talk about what it is, the red flags within relationships, and how it shows up during divorce and custody battles. We'll also explore Jennifer's Law, why it was created, and how it recognizes non-physical forms of abuse. Lisa shares how children are often victims and used as weapons in adult conflict, and shares ways parents can begin rebuilding secure bonds even after the trauma. This episode covers sensitive material, and it is intended for a mature audience. So parents, use discretion with your younger listeners. But I still hope you tune in, because understanding coercive control could make a big difference in your life or in the life of someone you love. Does your child have a speech-language delay and you really want them to talk? Do difficult behaviors derail home life and you know the frustration is a communication struggle? Does your child see a speech therapist and you wonder, what do they do and how can I help? If these or similar questions are in your mind, this podcast is for you. Hello, my name is Dina Lynn Rosenbusch. I am a speech-language pathologist that has worked with children from birth to 21 for 3 decades. And in my classrooms, I see you wanting to connect with the heart of your child, but their speech and language skills create a barrier. So if you have a kiddo that has difficult behaviors, needs to expand their language or learn to say speech sounds, and maybe even receives speech therapy, stay tuned, because in this podcast, you will learn how to use your daily life as a tool to communication practice and how to do that practice. You will become confident knowing you are making the difference you want to make. And you will hear success stories of parents who have navigated these struggles already. We'll do this all while focusing on building deep, meaningful connection and confidence in your kiddo. So grab a cup of coffee along with a notebook and pen. It's time to speak in the way your child's brain understands. And that is the language of play. Welcome back, listeners, to the Language of Play. I'm so glad you're with us today. As we begin, I want to thank the country of Armenia. Apparently, the podcast, The Language of Play, this one has ranked number 14 in parenting podcasts. And I have never seen your country on my list before. But you know, I've mentioned before that podcast stats are very fickle and they can be all over the place and they change about every few hours. So this is the snapshot in time, and Armenia was right on top. And followed by them, thank you, Luxembourg, Slovenia, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Egypt, Czech Republic, Russia, Singapore, Iceland, and Sweden. Your countries were on the list at the moment of my recording. Well, parents, what if your child isn't actually ignoring you, but they truly can't process what you're saying? We think they're not listening. But for many kids, speech sound delays or language struggles can make listening and following directions harder than it looks. That's why I created the 5 ways to get your kids to listen better. This is a short email sequence that will help you change how you interact with your kids so that they learn how to listen better. You can sign up for it by clicking in the link in the show notes. This is a free resource from the Language of Play to you. And if you are ready for a conversation about your kiddo and the struggles that you're having with their speech and language development, you will also find a link in the show notes to schedule a call and a conversation with me. I will listen to your concerns, and by the end of our conversation, you will have strategies. Even if it means that we're not going to work together, you will still benefit from the conversation because you will know what to do next. And a big thank you to our sponsor, Lightning Admin VA. When you're juggling your child's needs, your home, and a business, it can feel like there's no space left in your brain. Cindy at lightningadminva.com is a virtual assistant who helps clear that space by keeping your business running smoothly in the background. You focus on the heart work, and she'll handle the paperwork. Contact Cindy at lightningadminva.com, and you'll find that link in the show notes too. All right, let's get started with today's pre-recorded episode. Lisa Johnson is the co-founder of Been There, Got Out, a high-conflict divorce strategist and certified domestic violence advocate who has successfully represented herself through scores of court appearances. Her case, published in the Connecticut Law Journal, is being used as legal precedent. Her live testimony helped pass Jennifer's Law in Connecticut, the third state in America to expand its definition of domestic violence to include coercive control. She has books, groups, coaching, and courses to help in these volatile situations, and you can read her full bio in the show notes. Now, before we begin, listeners, I want you to consider the age of your child. You might want to download or bookmark this episode for later listening because kids don't always pick up on the whole message, and today's topics are mature. Not probably appropriate for kids between the ages of 3 and 10, as they understand in part, but they may not understand plainly and clearly. And if you have kids 12 to 15 listening, just plan for a conversation with them afterwards. It'll be a very good conversation, I'm sure, to get them problem solving and critically thinking and not be in a state of worry. So anyway, with that, welcome, Lisa, and thank you for being here today to discuss this very, very important topic.
My pleasure, and thanks for hosting. Sometimes it's hard to have these conversations, so I'm always glad when people are open to them.
Yes, they are very important. One of the things you talk about right from the get-go is recognizing red flags. And I bet you had red flags in your story. Would you give us the nutshell version of I'm sure, a very, very complex story? And talk about some red flags too.
Okay, well, everyone always sees red flags in hindsight and then blames themselves for not noticing them sooner, but none of us really pay attention because in the beginning of most relationships, and especially toxic relationships, we're meeting someone who is making us feel really, really good about ourselves. And one of the red flags in unhealthy relationships are when they go very, very quickly. And I actually, I knew my ex-husband for a little while, but we moved in pretty quickly. And that was one of the big flags, is kind of rushing into something very serious, because then you feel a little bit stuck. But I was basically with my ex for about 20 years, married for just about 18. Didn't really fight too often, occasionally. And one of the red flags I found out later was that he had been living a double life, and there had been signs. He spent a lot of time online. He told me from the beginning that he was so smart that most people didn't understand him. And so he didn't expect me to understand him either. And so that's why he needed to be part of these groups. And at that time, it was the 1990s. So it was like AOL chat groups. And I didn't question. I wasn't suspicious. I just thought, well, that's who he is. And I was always pretty independent myself. And I just believed, like all of us do in these kinds of relationships, that we love each other and we trust each other, and we're not sneaking, doing all kinds of, malicious things behind each other's backs. So another red flag throughout the relationship was occasionally out of nowhere, he would say, you know what? I'm really unhappy in this relationship and I'm thinking of leaving. Just out of nowhere, we would have been, having a great night, and then he would just say it out of the blue, which was kind of strange. And then I remember we were in couples counseling, 3 different ones towards the end, and one of the therapists said that was the biggest concern, that he would do that, besides other things, because he said you never really know where you stand with him. He's acting like everything's fine, but something is clearly wrong. And then he acts like everything is fine, but he never really talked about it. So one of the elements of coercive control, which was part of Jennifer's law, is when one person has most of the power and the authority in the relationship, and the other person sort of gives up their needs and feelings and desires to please that other person to reduce any kind of conflict. And so now, whenever I hear people say, oh, we never fight, I think something is wrong because you're two different people with two different worlds. And so you have to figure out how to manage each other's worlds. And so I guess maybe for a while, part of why we didn't fight was because I didn't question. I just allowed things to be.
Sure. Thank you for being vulnerable and exposing your story. Tell us about Jennifer's Law. What is that?
Okay, so Jennifer's Law, it started, there was a senator named Alex Kasser, and she decided that she wanted to have a law. At the time, it was just Hawaii and California that had coercive control laws, which looked not just at physical violence in relationships, but the bigger picture. So coercive control is really, it's a big word, but it basically is like someone's patterns of behavior where they kind of threaten, intimidate, assault, frighten another person to keep them dependent in the relationship on various levels. So coercive control, instead of just physical violence, it looks at emotional abuse, verbal, psychological, financial abuse, which is present in 99% of toxic relationships, cyber abuse, where someone can, is tracking you and following you, stalking, isolation, legal abuse, that's my specialty, sexual abuse, and something called revenge porn, which is when a person threatens that if you break up with them, they're going to publish sexual images of you, which of course not only affects you, but your family, your reputation, your job. So all of those things now became incorporated into Jennifer's Law, as well as some of the other laws in the different states that have them, so that when courts are deciding custody or restraining orders, they're not just looking at physical harm, they're looking at the broader things that are impacting the relationship between the two people as well as the children. So Jennifer's Law, the bill came out in 2020, then COVID hit, and we were supposed to all go testify in person. And so in March of 2021, about 108 people got on virtually, and we had about 3 minutes to speak. I think I was speaker number 8, and there were other significant speakers involved. There, Evan Stark, who's the author of the book Coercive Control. Evan Rachel Wood is a very famous actress who had been involved with Marilyn Manson, the musician. She talked about the need for coercive control laws. And so we all had our 3 minutes, and at the end, some time passed, but it went into effect 6 months later. So it passed. And now Massachusetts, as of last summer, became the 7th state. And then I just found something that North Carolina is starting to pass coercive control laws. So I feel like it's a wave that's hitting America slowly but surely. And I think it's a good
Wow.
thing.
That kind of gives me goosebumps because it's so important. And I'm really
Yeah.
glad that you're a part of it, even though I'm not glad you're a part of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Thank you. Got it.
So now that's a lot. And this podcast is, geared towards kids. So where does the kid fit into this whole story? Like where do you see this pertaining to the child?
So unfortunately, one of the biggest issues that we see in our clients' world, who all of our clients are dealing with something called legal abuse, and that's where their partners are basically using the legal system to control, harass, intimidate, coerce, and or impoverish them. And as part of that process, kids are used as weapons, where our client's ex basically will say something like, I'm going to leave you homeless, penniless, and childless. I'm going to try to take everything away from you, because their goal isn't to move on with life, but to make you suffer for the demise of the relationship. Doesn't matter who caused it. And so the ways that they are limited to still get at you, even once you separate physically, is through money, kids, and the court. And I always say money and the courts go hand in hand, and kids last the longest. And so one of the threats that our clients' exes make is like, I'm gonna claim that you're an unfit parent. I'm gonna go for full custody. I'm gonna I'm going to reduce the level of child support. So there's always something where our people feel this sense of fear, um, especially revolved around our children. Like, what if they take the kids from me, or what if they harm the kids? And I remember what I went through with this person, and now I'm out of the relationship, but my kid still has to go back and forth between us. How can I protect my child? It is really hard. It's
Yeah.
really, really hard. I think one of the main things we do is sort of accept that if we have a court order or an agreement, we have to follow it. If you don't follow a court order, you really jeopardize your situation with custody of the kids. And I know sometimes people get really scared, but if you're going to go back to court and try to get custody, you have to understand what's called the custody factors as well as the alienation factors. Our clients are often falsely accused of something called parental alienation, where they're basically blamed for when a child doesn't want to spend time with the other parent or see the other parent. And sometimes there's reasons for that, and sometimes there's no good justification. But whatever the case, it's really important to understand that whatever feelings you have towards your ex, unless there is documented patterns of abuse or some kind of evidence to show why that child should not be around that other person, you really have to be careful not to let your feelings kind of come out, like your feelings of disgust and distaste towards your ex come out towards your kids, because your kids are picking up so much on that energy. And so one of the things we see, even though I'm telling people listening, you be careful yourselves, is that the other side will attempt to turn the kids against you as part of their campaign to punish you. So this often happens before a relationship even ends. They kind of groom the kids to choose between them or you, because in their mind, a child is not allowed to love both of you. They have to pick one. And so it's this sort of you're with me or you're against me attitude towards the child, and child gets in what's called a loyalty conflict, where if they show you love, then they're punished by their other parent. And if you show them love, then they will give them attention. And so often children who are put in the middle of these situations, again, I'm only talking about like a very small percentage of cases. And because I deal with only high conflict cases, this is a huge part of our world. But when we see this, we often are dealing with the parents who have the children turned against them, and they're like, what do I do? How do I deal with this effectively? So and that's a really big topic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is a big topic and it's a
Right.
hard one. And
It
I'm
is.
glad you're doing the work you do, but it's sad that you even need to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So if parents are not going to be able to keep the child from the abusive, coercive control parent, then how do we give the children more agency, more voice?
Okay, that's a great question. So we deal with the protective parent, and the protective parent always wants to put on the superhero cape and be like, I'm going to make sure my kid spends as little time as possible with the parent, or I'm going to interfere and make sure like I do everything I can to keep them safe. Of course, you want to keep them safe, but bear in mind that these kids are going to grow up and go through the world and meet other very unhealthy people. So one of the best things you can do for your kids is help them learn to advocate for themselves. You don't want to step in and take over for them. You want to teach them ways to stand up for themselves, to question, to develop critical thinking skills. I interviewed a woman a few months ago named Tyra Juliet, who wrote a book called The Sky is Blue. And, or this, sorry, it's called The Sky is Red, but there's a game that I think we call it The Sky is Blue, where you can play with little kids, especially in the situation where you want them to develop these critical thinking skills. So you say something like, "Oh, the sky is red," and see what they say. And you want them to say, "What are you talking about? The sky's not red." And you say, "No, it is. It is." And you want them to argue with you, because they have to realize that what they see matters. Like their thoughts, their opinions matter, and they have to learn to question. I think with older kids, one of the really effective things that I didn't even know at the time, but my kids, my older son, my older child, who's a boy, was getting involved with debate. He was a national debate champion. And what debate does for kids all kids. I mean, every kid should do debate, but especially kids in these situations, is it helps them learn to see things from a variety of perspectives and learn to make a persuasive argument with both sides. Because with debate, kids are given a topic that's controversial. They have to argue one way, and then a minute later, they have to argue just as passionately the opposite. And so it really helps develop those great critical thinking skills. So I think when your kids are little, even things like going to the grocery store and saying, notice what's on eye level. Why do you think these brands are on eye level and the store brands are lower or high? Like, talk to them about things, watch things together, read books where there's conflict or ethical questions and say, what do you think about this? And then keep your mouth shut and let them start talking.
Mm. This is great language development too. It's great communication. It's great relationship building. That's super.
Right.
Now, on relationship, one parent, the coercive control parent,
Hmm.
tends to vilify or make worse in the sight of the child, the other parent. How does a parent that is in this situation handle knowing that they're being brought through the mud in front of their children's eyes? How do they handle that?
Oh, that question comes up all the time, and there's a variety of ways to handle it. Number one is to recognize the dynamic that's going on and to know that this is a thing. This isn't just personal towards you, that this is someone who is trying to turn the kid against you, and to get support from people who understand what's going on and who also might be experiencing it. Because it is really hard when they come at you and they are basically parroting the same things that your ex used to say, because that's going to trigger you. And we
Mm.
have to really make sure that we are self-regulated above everything else so that we can co-regulate, that we can help our child process what's going on. So number one, you have to understand what it is. You have to make sure you have support, because they're going to come at you, your kids, with disrespect and these lies, and you're going to want to just say, that's not true. Can't you see what the other person's doing to you? And that is the absolute wrong thing to do. So instead, what you want to do is be as self-regulated as possible and say, okay, like, tell me more. Tell me why you think that. Tell me where you got that from. And it's going to be really hard, but keep your mouth shut. Let them talk, because probably as they start talking, if you have a secure bond with your kids, and we can talk about how to develop those as well, they'll realize that it doesn't really make sense. But you can't be the one to tell them that, because if you tell them what they're supposed to think, you're doing the same thing that your ex is. You don't
Hmm.
want to do that same dynamic. They
Yeah.
have to learn that you respect what they think and what they feel, but you need to hear how they got to believing whatever it is they believe. And that goes back to the critical thinking activities we just talked about. What led you here? But staying as calm as possible. Okay, you're telling me that I'm this way. Where'd you get that idea from?
Right.
Calm, calmly.
That is so good. All right. So, how do you build those secure bonds?
Okay. So again, big, long work that has to be done. It's not just like, oh, I do this simple little thing and everything's going to be fine. So that is something that you develop as early as possible, or any time that you are around your kids. And it's never too late. But one thing that I love is something called the 10-minute rule, which I learned from a psychologist named Dr. Alina Boye. And she said that whenever you can, if you can take 10 minutes a day and completely focus on something that your child wants to do, like a child-led activity where you say, hey, I see you're really interested in doing it. Can you teach me how to do it? Give them your complete focused attention. Even if it's a video game. And my mistake was, when my son wanted to play video games, I was like, no, I don't want to play. But put them ahead of you and think, I can spend 10 minutes and get on their level and show that you're really paying attention to what they're saying. You're honoring something that they're interested in, even if you don't care about it. Pretend, but act like it matters and that they are important to you and you want to hear what they have to say. And so those are the ways, when you do this consistently, that you build a close bond with your kids, so that when they start hearing those poisonous messages from the other person, they already know that's not my experience with my parent.
Good
But
advice.
that's one thing that you definitely can do.
Yeah, that's really good advice. So, how can we help our kids thrive in this kind of environment?
Yeah. So I think knowing that you are there to listen to them, they're going to be getting all kinds of stuff at the other home probably.
Mhm.
So the first thing is recognize when they come back to you, they'll often be very dysregulated. So one of the things that you want to do on transition days is have things as calm as possible. Don't schedule more activities. Don't be like, okay, you just came here, now we got to go. If anything, do something that involves bilateral movement. And I just learned this from a domestic violence advocate who's a professor and has a passion for neurobiology. And bilateral movement is something which makes you use both parts of your body. So taking a walk together right after the kids come home or once they relax for a while is really good because it stimulates both parts of your brain, which helps with trauma in general and can be very soothing. So one thing that I always did with my kids, not on transition days, but in general, was we would walk our dog. We would take lots of walks and walk the dog around the block. So getting outside in nature, working your body, being side by side where you're not looking right at the kid is a good way to sort of connect but not be right in their face. I know one of our clients said that when her daughter would come back, she liked to go in the bathroom and turn the water on and just sort of look at the water flowing. So I think part of what you can do is if your child does have to go back and forth is to say, let's make your bedroom, like, let's make it a sanctuary, like have them involved with decorating it with you and say, what can we, like, what do you like, what are your tastes, what can we do to make it as nice as possible for you? Whereas they might not notice the need for something soothing, but just making them feel like they have some agency over their lives. So starting with the way their bedroom looks or feeling like they don't have to immediately do some activity are two things I think you can do.
Yeah. Wow. Such good advice for the situation that is extremely difficult.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing such good advice. If you were to give one piece of feedback, like a parent is in the situation or they're considering maybe this is the situation I'm actually in, um, what would be like one piece of advice that you would give somebody for right now? Most important thing to do first.
Okay. So again, I think it comes back to getting that support and understanding that even though it feels like you're the only one in it, that this actually affects 22 million people approximately in America and Canada alone. 30% of divorced parents say they feel like this is the situation they're in. What you need to remember is that even though it feels like this is awful and maybe it's better to just let the kid go, you cannot do that. You need to get yourself some support. You can, and there's things that you can do to try to repair the relationship if it's gotten bad. Um, and there's also things you can do legally, but you want to try to nip it in the bud as soon as possible and to not think that your kid doesn't still love you and want to be with you, even if they're saying that they don't, because kids in these situations are victims too, which we forget especially when they're coming and attacking us. They are victims too, and many of them are basically held hostage. We have a client who her her adult child, he's now an adult, she used to get these vicious text messages from him during his adolescent years when he was living with his father, and she would show them to us and be absolutely heartbroken. And I remember being like, are you sure that he is sending these? Well, fast forward a couple of years, he told her that he wasn't. She actually was able to see him in person at the door. His father wasn't looking. He hugged her and he said, I never sent any of those messages. And the relationship has been repaired. They're going on vacation together this summer. We've seen this with a lot of our clients who felt like it was a lost cause. It takes a lot of time and a lot of work, and it's not going to be easy, but you can definitely make things better. But you have to be patient and you have to have support.
Very good. Wow. Thank you for your topic today. It's a super important topic. Thank you for being willing to share and for coming on the podcast. Thank you for the work you do in the world. I appreciate it, Lisa.
Thank you. Thanks for hosting again. It was my pleasure.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in today. I bet you learned a lot. Remember to check the show notes to contact Lisa or me and to get other valuable resources. Hey parents, I hope you found this episode helpful. If so, would you please take 30 seconds and share it with a friend who also lives or works with children? I would really appreciate it if you would leave a quick review for the show on Apple Podcasts. I read every review, and it lights me up to know that this show is making a difference. Then come join my Facebook community, where you'll meet other parents who are dedicated to helping their children grow too. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thank you for joining me. Now it's time to go. Let's pop our kiddos in the strollers and go look around outdoors and see what we have to talk about.